So let's start with a number, 471 million. Just let that sink in for a second. It's a massive, massive number. What on earth could it be?
Well, that's the number of people in India's workforce, at least as of 2018. I mean, it's just a staggering figure, right? This is the engine that drives the entire Indian economy. But a number this huge, it just opens up a whole bunch of even bigger questions.
All right, so let's dive right in. In this explainer, we're going to profile the 21st century Indian worker. Who exactly are these 471 million people? What do they actually do all day? And, maybe most importantly, what are the huge challenges they're facing in an economy that's changing at lightning speed?
But before we can get into the nitty-gritty, we've got to get on the same page. We need to figure out who even counts as a worker. And trust me, the answer is a lot more complicated than you'd think.
Okay, so here's the official definition. A worker is anyone involved in an economic activity that adds to the gross national product, or GNP. Now, that's a pretty wide net, right? It doesn't just mean someone with a 9-to-5 job. It also includes folks who are self-employed, people who are just temporarily away from work, and even people who help out the main worker in a family business, for example.
But, and this is a huge but, that official definition immediately raises a really important question. What about all the unpaid work? We're talking about millions and millions of women who do absolutely essential work every single day, managing the household, helping out on the family farm, but don't get a paycheck for it.
And this right here is at the very heart of a major debate. Because that work isn't paid, it doesn't get counted in the national income. And if it's not counted, then guess what? These women aren't officially called workers. A lot of economists are saying, hold on a second, this is a huge blind spot. It basically makes a massive, crucial part of the real economy completely invisible. So let's keep that really important debate in the back of our minds. For now, though, we're going to look at the official data to see who is counted. And the best way to do that is to see how many people are working compared to the total population.
To do this, economists have a handy tool called the Worker Population Ratio, or WPR for short. It's basically just a percentage. It tells you, out of the whole population, how many people are actually working. Simple enough, right? A higher ratio means more people are in the workforce.
So what's the story in India? Well, the overall number is about 35%. So picture this. Out of every 100 people in India, about 35 of them are officially considered workers. And what's interesting is there isn't a huge gap between rural and urban areas. But, and you knew there was a but coming, the whole picture changes completely when you look at it through the lens of gender.
And when I say it changes, I mean it. The gap is absolutely enormous. Get this, over half of all men are in the workforce. For women, it's just 16.5%. That's a massive difference. It means that men make up about 77%, more than 3/4 of India's entire workforce. Wow, that really paints a stark picture of the gender gap in employment.
Okay, so we've got a sense of who is working. Now let's talk about what kind of work they're doing. We can pretty much sort the entire workforce into 3 main buckets.
All right, check this out. The biggest slice of the pie, over half the entire workforce at 52%, are self-employed. These are people running their own show, like a local cement shop owner. Then you've got the casual wage laborers. That's about 1/4 of the workforce. Think of a construction worker, for example, someone who isn't permanently employed. And finally, the smallest group at 23% are your regular salaried employees. This is your civil engineer, for instance, getting that reliable, regular paycheck. And where you live makes a world of difference. I mean, just look at this comparison. Out in rural India, it's all about self-employment, mostly farming, making up a huge 58% of the work. But head into the cities, and the script completely flips. The biggest group by far, at 47%, is regular salaried employees. It's like looking at 2 completely different economic worlds living side by side.
Okay, so this all leads us to one of the most critical and kind of confusing challenges facing India today. It's a paradox known as jobless growth.
So what in the world is jobless growth? Well, it's exactly what it sounds like. It's when a country's economy, its GDP, is growing. Things are getting produced, the country is getting richer, but it's not creating new jobs at the same pace. The wealth goes up, but the number of jobs just doesn't.
And this chart says it all. The gray line is the GDP growth, and the black line is employment growth. Just watch how that gap between them gets wider and wider over the years. Look at that period from 2005 to 2010. It's just wild. The GDP shot up by almost 9%, but job growth, it basically flatlined at almost 0. The economy was on fire, but it wasn't creating jobs.
And this is part of a huge long-term shift. If you go back to the 70s, almost 75% of the workforce was in farming. By 2018, that's down to under 45%. People are moving out of agriculture and into manufacturing and services, but, and here's the real kicker, those new sectors just aren't creating jobs fast enough to absorb everyone. That's the heart of the problem.
So where do all these people go? Well, that brings us to the reality for the vast majority of workers in India, the informal economy.
I think the best way to picture this is to think of an iceberg. The small tip that you can see above the water, that's the formal, organized sector. We're talking about companies with 10 or more employees, the ones that offer Social Security, benefits, and legal protection. But the huge, invisible mass of ice under the water, that's the informal sector. And that's where most people work. These are smaller operations with no safety net, no government protection, and basically zero power to bargain for better conditions.
And here's the really worrying part. The trend for a long time has been what's called informalization. Now, what does that mean? It means that instead of workers moving from those insecure informal jobs into secure formal ones, a lot of people are actually moving the other way, from secure to insecure.
So you've got jobless growth, you've got this massive informal sector, and when you put it all together, it leads us straight to the final and biggest challenge of all, unemployment. And in a country like India, unemployment isn't just one thing. It's got a few different faces. First, you have something called disguised unemployment. This is really common in farming. Imagine a small family farm that really only needs 5 people to run it, but there are 10 family members working there. Those extra 5 people aren't really adding any productivity. Then you've got seasonal unemployment. Think of jobs that only exist for a few months of the year. And finally, there's what we usually think of, open unemployment. That's when a person is ready, willing, and able to work, but just cannot find a job.
There's a line from the source material that just says it all. Unemployment and poverty are inseparable twins. And it's so true. Not being able to find a good job is directly tied to being in poverty. They're two sides of the exact same coin, and they create this vicious cycle that is just so hard to break.
So, at the end of the day, what are we left with? We have India, a rising global economic power, but its biggest challenge, its biggest puzzle, is its own people. As the economy keeps growing, the big question is this: can India figure out how to create enough quality jobs, good formal sector jobs, for the world's largest population? That really is the defining question for India's future.